In my practice, I often encounter stories where real storms are hidden behind outward calm. Recently, an elderly woman came to see me. At first glance, she looked confident, but as soon as she started talking, I saw tears in her eyes. Her speech was disjointed, but behind every word I could sense the weight she had been carrying for many years. Today, I want to share her confession with you. It is a story of pain, but also of the strength to move forward. This is what she told me. My name is Lorraine McCarthy. I am 54 years old, and I have been working as a cashier at a grocery store in Portland, Maine, for over 20 years. After my husband Douglas died of a heart attack 3 years ago, I have been living alone in our small house on the outskirts of town. Douglas and I had only one daughter, Evelyn, who became the center of my world after he passed away. My daughter works as an administrator at a medical clinic and, until recently, often visited me on weekends, helped around the house, and just talked to me about everything under the sun. We were close, as many mothers and daughters are after losing the head of the family, and I thought that closeness would last forever. But on that Saturday in late May, everything changed. Evelyn was getting married to Travis Winterbourne, and I was standing in front of the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the only fancy dress I owned. I had bought the dark blue dress with a small floral print 5 years ago for Douglas's sister's funeral, and it had been hanging in my closet ever since, waiting for a special occasion. I knew it wasn't really appropriate for a wedding, but I had no other options. My cashier's salary didn't allow me to splurge on expensive clothes, especially after having to pay Douglas's medical bills and roof repairs last fall. I tried to find some jewelry, but the only thing I had that was more or less suitable was a pair of pearl earrings that Douglas had given me on our 20th wedding anniversary. The pearls weren't real, but they looked decent. In the mirror, I saw a woman who was clearly trying to look festive, but the result was more touching than elegant. The wrinkles around my eyes had become more noticeable after the sleepless nights I had spent worrying about the upcoming wedding and how my relationship with my daughter's new family would turn out. The Pine Ridge Country Club was located 20 minutes outside of town, and as soon as I entered the grounds, I felt like I had stepped into another world. Manicured lawns stretched for acres, fountains with gilded figures spouted water into the sky. Natural stone paths led to the main building, and valets in white shirts and black ties greeted each car. The atmosphere was solemn but cold, like in a museum where you can only look but not touch. My old sedan looked out of place among the shiny SUVs, sports cars, and limousines that filled the parking lot. The young valet took my keys with a professional smile, but I noticed his gaze slide over the worn interior of my car. He was polite, but I felt that to him, I was not a guest, but rather someone to be patiently served. In the club foyer, I was greeted by Evelyn in a wedding dress that, as I later learned from one of the bridesmaids, cost more than I earn in 3 months. She looked beautiful, and for a moment I forgot all my worries when I saw the happiness in her eyes. But that happiness seemed somewhat nervous, as if she was afraid that something would go wrong. "Mom, you're here!" She hugged me, but I noticed her gaze linger on my dress for a second. "You look good." There was a note of uncertainty in her voice, and I realized that my outfit did not meet expectations. Other guests bustled around us, women in designer dresses and men in suits that were clearly tailor-made. I felt like a gray mouse among peacocks. Before I could respond, a tall woman in an elegant cream suit by some famous designer approached us. Victoria Winterbourne was 2 years younger than me, but she looked much younger thanks to expensive cosmetics and probably plastic surgery. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled in a hairdo that cost more than I spent on food in a week, and the jewelry she wore, diamond earrings and a bracelet, was clearly worth more than all my possessions. A gold watch sparkled on her wrist, which I was sure cost as much as a new car. Evelyn, dear, the photographer is waiting for you in the garden, Victoria said, barely glancing in my direction. Her voice was melodious but cold. We need to take family photos before the ceremony. The light is perfect right now, and in half an hour the sun will shift. Of course, Evelyn replied quickly, as if afraid of being late for an important meeting. Mom, this is Victoria, Travis's mother. Victoria, this is my mother. Lorraine, Victoria finally looked at me, and in her gaze I read an assessment that was clearly not in my favor. Her eyes slid over my dress, my earrings, my hair, which I had done myself at home, and I could see her mentally cataloging every detail of my appearance. Nice to meet you, she said coldly, extending her hand for a formal handshake. Her hand was cold and manicured, with perfect nails. Evelyn has told me so much about you. I doubted that was true, but I nodded and shook her cool hand. The handshake was quick and formal, as if she were performing an unpleasant duty. Likewise. Travis is a wonderful young man, I said, trying to sound sincere. Yes, we are very proud of him. Victoria turned to Evelyn, completely ignoring me. Darling, we really can't keep the photographer waiting. Time is money, especially when it comes to professional services of this caliber. Evelyn looked at me guiltily, and in her eyes, I saw an apology she didn't dare say out loud. Mom, sit in the lobby for now, okay? We'll all meet up after the photo shoot. There's a bar there. You can get something to drink. I nodded, although I wanted to ask why I couldn't be in the family photos. Wasn't I family? But I kept quiet, not wanting to cause a scene in my first few minutes here. I was left alone among guests who clearly knew each other and were chatting in groups. Most of the women were dressed in expensive dresses and suits in pastel colors, their jewelry sparkling in the light of the chandeliers, and their hairstyles looking as if they had been done by a professional stylist. Men in perfectly tailored suits discussed business, real estate, and plans for summer vacations in Europe. I felt invisible, as if I were a servant who had accidentally stumbled into a social event. I went to the bar and ordered mineral water, trying not to pay attention to the bartender's appraising glance. Next to me stood a group of women my age, discussing private schools for their grandchildren and upcoming cruises. One of them was talking about how difficult it was to find a good housekeeper who knew how to properly care for antique furniture. Our last girl was sweet, but she didn't understand the difference between Sèvres porcelain and ordinary tableware, complained the woman in pink tweed. We had to let her go after she washed the family silver in the dishwasher. The other women nodded sympathetically, and I realized that for them, such problems were serious life difficulties. I moved away, feeling even more like a stranger in this world. The ceremony was beautiful, though very formal. The priest spoke about the union of two families, about traditions and heritage, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was talking not about my daughter's love, but about some kind of business partnership or corporate merger. Travis looked good in his expensive suit, but I didn't see the sincerity and tenderness in his eyes that Douglas had when we got married 28 years ago in a small church on the other side of town. We didn't have the money for a lavish wedding back then, but there was something real that made that day special. Evelyn was beautiful, but I noticed how tense she was during the ceremony, as if she were performing a role she had memorized. When the priest asked if there were any objections to the marriage, I held my breath for a moment. But of course, no one said anything. After the ceremony, the guests moved to the banquet hall, where the tables were decorated with white roses, gold ribbons, and candles in crystal candlesticks. Each table was set with gold-rimmed porcelain, and I counted 4 forks on each side of the plate, not understanding why so many pieces of cutlery were needed. In the center of the hall stood a multi-tiered cake decorated with fresh flowers, which looked more like a work of art than a dessert. I found my seat according to the card. I was seated at table number 8, quite far from the main table where the newlyweds and their closest relatives were seated. My table was mostly made up of distant relatives and colleagues who, like me, clearly did not belong to the Winterbournes' immediate family circle. I noticed that the card with my name on it was written in a different handwriting than the others, as if I had been added to the list at the last minute. Next to me sat an elderly man with a gray mustache who introduced himself as Travis's paternal uncle. "Richard Winterbourne," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "And you must be the bride's mother. Victoria said you would be coming Lorraine McCarthy," I replied. "Yes, Evelyn is my daughter." "A lovely girl," Richard nodded, unfolding his linen napkin. "Travis is lucky to have found such a wife. Although I must say, our boy has a lot to offer too. A good family, a stable job at a bank, prospects for career growth. In a few years, he could become vice president of the branch." I nodded in agreement, although his tone implied that my daughter had received more in this marriage than she had given in return. He spoke of Travis as a prize that Evelyn had not quite deserved. "What do you do, Lorraine?" he asked, taking a sip of wine from a glass that the waiter had filled without his asking. "Evelyn said you work in the service industry." "I work as a cashier at Hanford's supermarket," I replied honestly, seeing no point in embellishing the truth. Richard nodded with the look of someone trying not to show his surprise or, perhaps, disappointment. "I see. Well, retail is always a necessary field. Someone has to do it." He paused, cutting a piece of salmon on his plate. "Although, of course, it's quite physically demanding work, especially for a woman your age." His condescending tone hurt me more than outright rudeness would have. He spoke to me as if I were a child to be pitied for my poor choice of profession. "I've been working there for 20 years, I said, trying to remain calm. "I enjoy interacting with people." Of course, of course," he nodded condescendingly. "Everyone has their own talents. The main thing is that Evelyn managed to rise above it. Education is a great thing. I wanted to remind him that it was my job that paid for Evelyn's college, but I kept quiet. The whole evening was not about sorting things out with my brother-in-law's relatives. During the main course, a middle-aged woman in a purple dress approached our table. She introduced herself as Victoria's friend and began asking the other guests about their jobs and families. When it was my turn, she smiled a forced smile. "And you must be from Evelyn's family?" she asked. "I'm her mother," I replied. "Oh, how lovely!" Her voice became even more insincere. "Huh, and where did you meet the Winterbourne family?" The question sounded as if she implied that I couldn't possibly know them in normal social circles. "We met when Evelyn started dating Travis," I replied. "Ah, I see." The woman nodded and immediately switched to talking to another guest, clearly losing interest in me. During the toasts, Victoria gave a long speech about how happy she was to welcome Evelyn into the Winterbourne family, how she hoped the girl would quickly settle into their circle and find her place among the wives of successful men. She talked about family traditions, about the charity events Evelyn would now be able to participate in, about the country house where they would spend their weekends. Victoria never once mentioned me or the McCarthy family, as if Evelyn had come into the world on her own, without parents or a past. After dinner, dancing began to the live music of a string quartet, which was followed by a jazz ensemble. I watched my daughter twirl in the arms of her new husband to the melodies played by the musicians in tuxedos. She was smiling, but there was something forced about her smile, as if she was trying to live up to the expectations of those around her and was afraid to relax. When the music slowed down, I saw Victoria dancing with her husband and noticed how skillfully she controlled the dance floor, bringing other couples to the right people for introductions. It was not just a party, but a carefully staged social event. When I approached the newlyweds to congratulate them, Victoria was nearby and steered the conversation in such a way that I felt out of place. Evelyn, dear, Mrs. Chandler wants to introduce you to her sister-in-law. She works at the same hospital as you, only in the private ward, Victoria said, pointing to a group of elegant women by the fireplace. This could be very useful for your career. Connections in the medical field are extremely important. Without waiting for her daughter's response, Victoria took her by the arm and led her to the group of elegant middle-aged women, leaving me standing alone next to Travis. Travis noticed my confusion and smiled politely, but there was no sincerity in his smile. "Lorraine, thank you for coming. It means a lot to Evelyn," he said in a perfunctory tone. "Of course," I replied. "She's my only daughter. I would never miss her wedding." "I'll take good care of her," he said, but his words lacked the warmth I expected to hear from a man who had just married the love of his life. It sounded more like a business commitment. "I hope you'll be happy," I replied, although something inside me doubted the sincerity of his feelings. Towards the end of the evening, I tried to find a moment to talk to Evelyn alone, but she was always surrounded by guests or Travis's relatives. Victoria skillfully managed her time, introducing her to the right people and engaging her in conversations about plans for the future. When I finally managed to approach her, she looked tired and a little confused. "Mom, how are you?" "Are you having fun?" she asked, but her voice sounded tired. Everything's fine, dear. It's a beautiful wedding," I replied, trying to sound sincere. "Yes, Victoria worked so hard on the planning. She's an incredible woman, isn't she? All the details, coordinating with vendors, choosing the menu. I could never have done it myself." I nodded, although my opinion of my daughter's future mother-in-law was quite different. It seemed to me that Victoria had organized this wedding not for the happiness of the newlyweds, but to demonstrate her own status and taste. "Eve, maybe you could come over tomorrow? We can talk, like we always did on Sundays," I suggested hopefully. Evelyn looked at me with slight irritation, as if I had suggested something inappropriate. "Mom, we're flying to Tuscany tomorrow morning for our honeymoon. Victoria booked us a villa in Chianti for 2 weeks, and when we get back, we'll have a lot to do with moving and settling into our new home. Let's not talk about it today, okay? Don't ruin my day with such conversations." Her words hurt me more than I expected. I didn't want to ruin her day. I just wanted to remain a part of her life, as I always had been. "Of course, I'm sorry. Just call me when you have time," I said, trying not to show how hurt I was. "I will," she replied, but she was already distracted by someone else who had come up to congratulate her. I left the wedding before the celebration was over, citing fatigue and an early shift the next day. I sat in the car for a few minutes, looking at the lit windows of the club where the party was still going on. The music could be heard even in the parking lot, and the laughter and voices created a festive atmosphere from which I was excluded. For the first time in many years, I felt truly alone. Douglas would have been upset to see how his wife was being treated at his only daughter's wedding. 4 months passed in a blur. After the honeymoon, Evelyn rarely called me, always rushing and saying that she and Travis were busy settling into their new home. When I offered to help or just visit them, my daughter replied that she was not yet ready to receive guests, as the renovation was not yet complete. I tried not to take it to heart, understanding that the newlyweds needed to get used to each other, but the emptiness in the house was becoming more and more palpable. My days passed in the usual rhythm of work at the store. I scanned barcodes, rang up receipts, smiled at customers, and tried not to think about how my life had changed. My coworkers sometimes asked about my daughter, and I told them that she was happily married and settling into her new life. But inside, I had a growing feeling that I was losing the only person close to me. In mid-September, Evelyn finally called and invited me to dinner. "Mom, we'd like you to come over on Saturday. Dinner is at 7 p.m. Travis's parents will be there, and we want to discuss something important." There was a certain formality in her voice, as if she were inviting business partners to a meeting. "Of course, dear. I'd love to see your new home." "Great. I'll text you the address. And Mom, try to dress nicely, okay?" The last sentence hurt me, but I didn't say anything. Maybe she was just nervous about her husband's parents being there. Evelyn and Travis's house was in the Eastern Promenade neighborhood, where doctors, lawyers, and bankers lived. The two-story colonial-style building with white columns and a well-manicured lawn looked like a picture from a magazine about country living. I parked on the street, not daring to drive up the driveway, where two expensive cars were parked, clearly belonging to the Winterbourne family. Evelyn met me at the door, wearing a black dress I had never seen before. It was simple but clearly expensive and flattered her figure. Her hair was styled elegantly, and her makeup was flawless. "Mom, come in. How did you get here?" "Fine, it's not far. Beautiful house," I replied, looking around. The interior was strikingly immaculate. Everything looked as if it had just come out of an expensive furniture store. Cream-colored leather sofas, a dark wood coffee table, paintings in gilded frames on the walls. But despite all its beauty, the house lacked the coziness and warmth that make a dwelling a home. "Thank you." Victoria helped with the furniture and decor. She has excellent taste. We walked into the living room, where Victoria and Richard were already sitting with glasses of wine in their hands. Victoria was dressed in a gray suit that emphasized her status, and Richard, in a dark blue jacket, looked like a man who had just returned from a business meeting. "Lorraine, how nice to see you," Victoria said, without getting up from the sofa. Her smile was polite but cold. "Good evening," I replied, feeling uncomfortable in their presence. Richard nodded to me and stood up to shake my hand. His handshake was formal, like that of a banker meeting a client of medium importance. "Have a seat, Lorraine. Travis will be here in a moment. He's finishing an important call in his office." I sat down on the edge of the sofa, trying not to crush the cushions, which lay in perfect symmetry. Evelyn sat down next to Victoria, and I noticed how natural they looked together, like mother and daughter. "How's work?" Victoria asked, in the same tone one might use to ask about the weather. "Fine, thanks. There are always a lot of customers in the fall, getting ready for winter." "Yes, I can imagine. It must be exhausting to be on your feet all day." There was condescending pity in her words, which was more annoying than outright contempt. Travis appeared a few minutes later, greeted everyone, and sat down next to his wife. He looked tense, as if he were preparing for an important presentation. "Well, dear ones, it's time to eat," Victoria announced, like the hostess of the house. The dining room was decorated in the same style as the living room. A long mahogany table, high-backed chairs, a crystal chandelier. The table setting was impeccable, with several types of glasses and a variety of cutlery. The dinner consisted of dishes I had only seen in restaurants: a salad with arugula and goat cheese, salmon with some kind of exquisite sauce, vegetables cooked in a way I didn't know the name of. Everything was delicious, but too fancy for a normal family dinner. "Evelyn is an excellent cook," Victoria praised. "I gave her some recipes from our chef." Of course, they require high-quality ingredients, but the result is worth it. "Yes, it's very tasty," I agreed, although I realized that these dishes cost more than I spend on food in a week. The conversation during dinner revolved around Travis's plans at work, news from the Winterbourne circle of acquaintances, and upcoming events they were planning to attend. I listened, feeling like a spectator in someone else's life. After the main course, Evelyn stood up and smiled nervously. "We have some news we wanted to share with the family." She looked at Travis, who nodded encouragingly. "We, I mean, I'm pregnant. 12 weeks." My heart leapt with joy. A grandson or granddaughter. I had always dreamed of the day I would become a grandmother. "Evelyn! That's wonderful!" I got up to hug my daughter, but Victoria beat me to it. "My dear!" she exclaimed, hugging Evelyn tightly. "What wonderful news! Richard, we're going to be grandparents." Richard stood up and hugged his son, patting him on the back. "Congratulations, son." "Great job," I stood nearby, waiting for my turn to congratulate my daughter. But Victoria continued talking, not letting go of Evelyn. "We need to make an appointment with the best obstetrician in town right away. Dr. Hamilton delivers all our friends' babies. And of course, we need to think about the nursery. I have a wonderful interior designer who specializes in nurseries." "Victoria, let me congratulate my daughter first," I interjected, finally approaching Evelyn. Of course, of course." Victoria backed off, but there was a flash of irritation in her eyes. I hugged Evelyn, feeling how tense she was. "Darling, I'm so happy. When is the baby due?" "At the end of March," she replied, but quickly pulled away from my embrace. It will be a spring baby, just like you were," I said tenderly. "Yes, Mom." Evelyn sat back down at the table, and everyone followed her example. Victoria immediately took the initiative. "So we have a lot of planning to do. First, we need to find good classes for pregnant women. Not the public ones, but private ones that teach the right approach to motherhood. Second, the nursery. I think it should be done in neutral colors until we find out the sex of the baby. I could help with the nursery," I offered. "I have experience, and I remember what a newborn needs." Victoria looked at me with poorly concealed surprise. "Oh, that's very kind of you, Lorraine. But we already have a designer who works with families in our circle. He understands modern requirements for safety and style." I'm not talking about design," I continued. "Just practical things. Which crib to choose, where to put the changing table." "Mom," Evelyn interrupted me, "you're not very familiar with modern trends. Everything is different now than it was 26 years ago when you were raising me." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I looked at my daughter, unable to believe she could say such a thing. "Of course," I said quietly. I just wanted to help." "We really appreciate your desire to participate," Richard interjected diplomatically. "But Victoria is right. There are professionals now who know better what a modern child needs." Victoria nodded and continued planning my grandson's future as if I weren't even at the table. "And we need to think about a nanny. I know an agency that provides nannies for the best families in town. They have girls with teaching degrees and references." "Maybe it's too early to think about a nanny," I suggested cautiously. "Evelyn is going to take care of the baby herself at first, isn't she?" "Come on, Lorraine," Victoria laughed. "Evelyn works. She has a career. She can't just sit at home and change diapers. Besides, a professional nanny knows how to properly develop a child from the first days of life." Evelyn nodded in agreement with her mother-in-law. "Victoria's right, Mom." "I can't quit my job." "Of course, dear," I agreed, though something tightened inside me. "I just thought I could babysit sometimes when needed." "That's sweet," Victoria said in the tone one uses with a child who has offered to help with a difficult task. "But professional care is a different matter entirely." Travis remained silent throughout the discussion, occasionally nodding at his mother's words. Evelyn also listened more than she spoke, as if others were making decisions for her. What about the name? I asked, hoping to steer the conversation towards something more pleasant. Oh, we have some wonderful family names. Victoria perked up. If it's a boy, Richard, after his grandfather, or William, after Travis's great-grandfather. And if it's a girl, Victoria or Elizabeth. What about family names on Evelyn's side? I asked. Douglas would be a beautiful name for a boy, after her father. An awkward silence ensued. Victoria pursed her lips, as if I had suggested something indecent. We'll consider all the options, Travis said diplomatically. Of course, Evelyn added quickly. It's too early to think about that yet. But I could see in her eyes that the matter had already been decided against me. The rest of the evening was spent discussing plans that had no place for me. Victoria talked about the best baby stores, childbirth classes, and the private maternity hospital where the wives of all the successful men in town gave birth. Evelyn responded enthusiastically to each of her suggestions, while my timid attempts to interject were ignored or politely dismissed. When I was about to leave, Evelyn walked me to the door. Thanks for coming, Mom. Honey, I'm so happy for you. Just, if you need me, call me, okay? Of course, she replied, but there was no conviction in her voice. I drove home in complete silence, thinking about what had happened. The joy of the pregnancy news was overshadowed by the realization that in the life of my future grandchild, I would be a distant relative who was tolerated out of politeness. At home, I sat down at the kitchen table and cried for the first time in a long time. Not out of hurt, but out of the realization that I was losing not only my daughter, but also the opportunity to be part of her child's life. Several weeks passed after that evening when she announced her pregnancy, and I felt the distance between me and Evelyn only growing. She rarely called, and when I tried to ask her how she was feeling and how her pregnancy was going, she gave one-word answers or referred to Victoria's advice. Victoria says that nausea in the first trimester is normal and you don't need to take medication, she said during one of our short phone conversations. She has special teas that help. What about ginger? I suggested. I remember when I was pregnant with you, ginger tea helped a lot. Mom, times have changed. Victoria knows the latest methods. Every time I tried to share my experience or give advice, Evelyn politely but firmly made it clear that she preferred to listen to her mother-in-law. Gradually, I began to understand that my opinion no longer mattered when it came to motherhood. My friend Cheryl, whom I had known for over 15 years, was concerned about my condition. We met when our children attended the same school and had supported each other through all of life's difficulties ever since. Lorraine, you can't just give up, she told me during our meeting at a cafe. Evelyn is your daughter, and that child is your grandchild. I'm not giving up, Cheryl. I just don't want to impose. Maybe it's normal for young families to keep to themselves at first. To themselves, but not from the Winterbournes, Cheryl pointed out. I think Victoria is deliberately distancing Evelyn from you. I knew my friend was right, but I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think that my daughter was just going through a difficult period of adjustment to her new life. In mid-October, I decided to try again to repair our relationship. I called Evelyn and suggested visiting her. Mom, I don't know. We have a lot going on right now. We're settling into the house and getting ready for the baby. That's exactly why I want to help. Maybe there's something you need to buy or prepare? After a long pause, Evelyn agreed. Okay, come tomorrow afternoon. But not for long. I have a meeting with the children's designer at 6. I arrived with a few small gifts, a book about pregnancy that helped me when I was expecting Evelyn, and some booties I had knitted. My daughter met me at the door, and I immediately noticed that she looked tired. How are you feeling, dear? Fine. The morning sickness is almost gone. Victoria was right. It gets easier by the 14th week. We went into the living room, where catalogs of children's products and interior design magazines lay on the coffee table. Fabric samples, furniture photos, and color palettes were scattered everywhere. "See how much there is to think about," said Evelyn, sitting down on the sofa. "Victoria is helping us choose. She says it's important to create the right atmosphere for the child's development from the very beginning." I sat down next to her and picked up one of the catalogs. The prices for children's furniture made me gasp. "Ev, have you seen how much all this costs? A crib for $3,000? It's high-quality furniture, Mom, made from environmentally friendly materials with modern safety features. But a baby doesn't care what kind of wood the crib is made of. The main thing is that it's safe and comfortable." Evelyn frowned. "You don't understand. It's not just a crib, it's an investment in the child's future." Victoria explained that cheap furniture can contain harmful chemicals. "What's wrong with regular stores? You can find good stuff for reasonable prices at Target or Walmart, Mom." Evelyn got up from the couch. "My child will not sleep in furniture from Walmart. We can afford better." "It's not about what you can afford. It's about what's reasonable. Children grow quickly, and in 2 years, he'll need another crib." Victoria says it's wrong to skimp on children. "And anyway, why do you always criticize our decisions?" I felt irritation rising. "I'm not criticizing, I'm trying to give advice. I have experience raising children. Your experience is outdated, Mom. Things are different now. Modern children need different approaches. Children need love and care, not expensive toys and designer furniture." "That's not enough," Evelyn snapped. "Victoria's right when she says we need to think about the child's future, their development, their education. And you suggest buying everything in cheap stores. I raised you by buying things in regular stores, and you grew up to be a wonderful person." "Yes, but I could have achieved more if we had had the opportunity." Her words hurt me deeply. I looked at my daughter, not recognizing the child I had raised. "What do you mean?" "Mom, don't make a tragedy out of this. I just want to give my child a better childhood than I had." "What was wrong with your childhood?" Evelyn sat back down on the sofa and sighed heavily. "Nothing was wrong, but it was modest. I remember being embarrassed to invite classmates over because we had old furniture and a small TV. We did the best we could. Your father worked overtime to pay for your college, I know, Mom. And I'm grateful. But now I have the opportunity to give my child more." At that moment, the doorbell rang. Evelyn stood up, clearly pleased by the interruption to our conversation. "That must be Victoria." She promised to stop by. A minute later, Victoria entered the living room, carrying several large bags. She was wearing a white cashmere sweater and dark pants, and looked impeccable, as always. "Evelyn, dear." She kissed her daughter on the cheek. "I was in Boston and stopped by this lovely children's store." I couldn't resist noticing me. Victoria nodded with a forced smile. "Oh, Lorraine, I didn't know you were here. Good afternoon, Victoria." "What are those catalogs?" she asked, looking at the magazines scattered across the table. "Are you choosing something?" "Mom and I were discussing furniture for the nursery," Evelyn replied, and I heard tension in her voice. "Oh, I see," Victoria said, sitting down in the chair opposite us. "And what do you think of the Italian collection I showed you?" "Mom thinks it's too expensive," Evelyn said, and I felt like I was being set up. Victoria turned to me with a look of surprise. "Really? But it's for your grandson, Lorraine. How can you skimp on children?" "I'm not suggesting skimping. I just think you can find good things at a reasonable price," Victoria repeated with a slight smirk. "What do you consider a reasonable price for a crib?" I felt cornered. "Well, $300 or $400. Maybe 500 for a really good one. Victoria laughed, but it was a cold laugh. Lorraine, for $500, you can only buy a folding bed at Walmart. Serious children's furniture costs serious money. Not everything can be measured in money, I objected. The main thing is love and care. Of course, love is important, Victoria agreed in a patronizing tone. But loving parents want to give their children the best. They don't justify their stinginess with pretty words about love. Evelyn sat silently, staring at the floor. I waited for her to say something in my defense, but my daughter remained silent. I'm not stingy, I said, trying to remain calm. I'm just practical. You know, Lorraine. Victoria leaned forward. I understand that it's difficult for you. You've lived your whole life, modestly. That's your world, your values. But Evelyn is now part of a different family, with different standards. What are you trying to say? I'm saying that your provincial approach to life is not suitable for raising a child in our family. Evelyn deserves a better environment, and so does her child. The word provincial sounded like a slap in the face. I looked at Evelyn, expecting her to be outraged by such treatment of her mother. Victoria, you have no right. Mom, please, Evelyn interrupted me. Don't make a scene. I'm making a scene? I couldn't believe it. Ev, did you hear what she said? I heard. And Victoria didn't mean to hurt you. She's just explaining reality. Victoria smiled with the look of someone who had won. Evelyn understands that I'm speaking from the best of intentions. I want her and her child to be happy. And I don't want my daughter to be happy? I asked, feeling my voice tremble. Of course you do, Victoria replied softly. But your understanding of happiness is limited. You suggest saving money on the child, buying cheap things. That's not caring. That's selfishness. Selfishness? I asked, not believing my ears. Yes! You want Evelyn to stay at your level instead of rising above it. That's selfishness. I got up from the couch, feeling like I couldn't take it anymore. Evelyn, do you really agree with what Victoria is saying? My daughter looked up at me with a distant expression. Mom, Victoria just wants to help me. She understands what it's like to be part of a family with certain standards. And I don't meet those standards? You're just from a different world, Mom, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I live in a different world now, Victoria nodded, with the look of an understanding mentor. Lorraine, no one is saying you're a bad mother. You did everything you could within your means, but now Evelyn has different means, and she needs support, not criticism. When did I criticize? Today. You criticized our choice of furniture, our spending on the child, instead of being happy that Evelyn has the opportunity to give her child the best. Evelyn nodded. Victoria's right, Mom. Thank you for understanding. She turned to her mother-in-law. I appreciate your support. Victoria smiled warmly at Evelyn. Honey, I'll always support you. We are family. I stood in the middle of the living room, feeling out of place. My own daughter was thanking another woman for her understanding and accusing me of not being supportive. I think I'd better leave, I said quietly. Mom, don't be offended, Evelyn said, but there was no sincerity in her voice. Just think about what we discussed. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. Victoria remained seated in her chair with a satisfied look on her face, while Evelyn walked me to the door. Call me when you're ready to talk calmly. My daughter said goodbye. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I sat in the car for a few minutes, trying to make sense of what had happened. In just over an hour, my daughter had turned into a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to her happiness, and a woman she had known for only a few months had become a source of wisdom and support for her. At home, I called Cheryl and told her everything. Lorraine, that woman is manipulating your daughter. She's turning her against you. But Evelyn agreed to everything herself. She thanked Victoria for her understanding. Because she's been brainwashed. She's been made to believe that you're not good enough, that your advice is outdated, that you're standing in the way of her happiness. I knew my friend was right, but I had no idea what to do about it. Trying to fight for my daughter could push her away for good, and meekly accepting the situation meant losing not only my daughter, but also my future grandchild. What should I do, Cheryl? Don't give up. Give her time to understand what's going on. Sooner or later, she'll see this woman's true colors. But time was working against me. With each passing day, Victoria strengthened her influence over Evelyn, and I became more and more of a stranger in my own daughter's life. 3 months passed in complete silence after that argument. November turned into December. Then January came, and there was no call or message from Evelyn. I dialed her number several times, but never dared to press the call button. Each time, I stopped myself, remembering her last words that she would call when she was ready to talk calmly. Winter in Maine was particularly harsh that year. The snow lay thick, and the wind from the ocean chilled me to the bone. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner for one, and watched TV, trying not to think about the fact that somewhere 20 minutes away, my daughter was carrying my grandson or granddaughter, and I knew nothing about it. My only outlet was meeting with Cheryl. We saw each other once a week, usually on Saturday mornings at a cafe on Congress Street. My friend tried to cheer me up, but I could see the concern in her eyes. Lorraine, you can't just wait for her to deign to call, Cheryl said, stirring her coffee. This is your daughter and your grandson. What can I do? If I show up uninvited, she'll say I'm intruding. If I call, I'll be pressuring her. You're her mother. You have a right to know how the pregnancy is going. Rights and opportunities are different things. Evelyn has made it clear that she prefers Victoria's advice. I told Cheryl about my attempts to find information about my daughter through mutual acquaintances, but our circle of mutual acquaintances was small. Several times I deliberately drove to areas where I might meet Evelyn, but without success. Once I saw their car at the doctor's office, but didn't dare to approach them. Work helped me take my mind off things, but only partially. At the checkout, I mechanically scanned items, printed receipts, and answered customers' questions. But my thoughts kept returning to my daughter. It was especially difficult when pregnant women or customers with small children came through the checkout. I looked at baby products, diapers, formula, toys, and thought that soon my grandson would need all of these things, but I might not even know about his birth. In mid-January, something happened that finally convinced me of the seriousness of the situation. I was in the grocery section and saw Victoria. She was choosing something from the organic products, looking elegant even in her everyday clothes. I thought this was my chance to find out how Evelyn was doing, so I approached her. "Hello, Victoria." She turned around, and for a moment I saw a flash of irritation in her eyes, which she quickly hid behind a polite smile. "Oh, Lorraine! What a surprise! How is Evelyn? How is her pregnancy going?" "Great," Victoria replied dryly. "She's thriving. We found a wonderful doctor. She's eating right, and she does prenatal yoga regularly." "Has the morning sickness gone away?" "Long ago. A healthy lifestyle works wonders." Victoria clearly had no intention of continuing the conversation, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Maybe I could visit her, or she could come to see me. Victoria looked at me with an expression that was a mixture of pity and irritation. "Lorraine, Evelyn needs peace and quiet right now. Stress is bad for the baby. When she's ready to talk, she'll contact you herself." Stress? Am I a source of stress for my own daughter? Conflict always causes stress. You remember our last conversation I wanted to argue, to remind her who had caused the conflict, but Victoria was already turning away. Goodbye, Lorraine. Take care of yourself. After that meeting, I finally understood that the situation would not change on its own. Victoria had no intention of loosening her control over Evelyn, and my daughter didn't seem to see a problem with that. The call came in early February, on a Sunday morning. I was washing the dishes after breakfast when the phone rang. When I saw Evelyn's name on the screen, my heart leapt into my throat. Hello? Hi, Mom. How are you? My daughter's voice sounded cautious, as if she were checking to see if it was safe to talk to me. Evelyn! Honey, I'm so glad to hear from you. How are you? How are you feeling? Fine. Everything's fine. I'm 26 weeks along. 26 weeks. I had missed almost 4 months of my only daughter's pregnancy. What does the doctor say? Is everything okay with the baby? Yes, everything is fine. The baby is developing normally and moving actively. Evelyn's voice warmed when she talked about the baby, and I felt hopeful. I missed you so much, dear. I was so worried. Mom, I missed you too, she said quietly. Maybe we could make up? Of course. I never wanted to fight with you. Come visit me or let me know when I can come to you. Well, I think it's better to talk on the phone for now. We're going to be very busy soon. What kind of busy? Evelyn paused, and I sensed that she was gathering her thoughts. We're having a baby shower next week. Victoria is organizing it. All her friends will be there. Travis's co-workers' wives, some of my co-workers. My heart sank. A baby shower is a celebration dedicated to the future child. Traditionally, it is organized by the mother or a close friend of the pregnant woman. What a wonderful idea! When is it? I'll help with the arrangements. Mom! Evelyn's voice tightened. Victoria has already organized everything, and, well, we think it's better if you don't come. What? I couldn't believe my ears. Why? Just, well, after our last conversation. I don't want to create an awkward situation in front of the guests. Evelyn, I'm your mother. How could I create an awkward situation at my grandson's party? Mom, please don't make this difficult. The guests will be from our circle. Victoria's worried that there might be some awkward moments. Awkward moments? Because of me? Not because of you personally. It's just, you know that sometimes you say things that might seem, not very appropriate. I sat down on a chair, feeling my legs buckle. What kind of things, Evelyn? Well, for example, that expensive things are unnecessary, or that things used to be different. Guests might misunderstand. Don't I have a right to my own opinion? Of course you do, but a baby shower is not the place to argue about parenting or family values. I remained silent, trying to process what I had heard. My own daughter was excluding me from a party dedicated to my grandson because she was afraid I would say something inappropriate. What exactly will happen at this party? I finally asked. The usual things. Games, gifts, treats. And Evelyn's voice became more animated. We're going to reveal the baby's gender! Victoria ordered a special cake. When we cut it, everyone will find out if it's a boy or a girl. The blow was devastating. Revealing the baby's gender was a moment I had dreamed of since I found out my daughter was pregnant. I imagined how we would find out together who we were expecting, how we would make plans, choose names, and imagine the future. Ah, Evelyn, I said, trying not to let my voice tremble. Do you understand that I also want to know who you're expecting? It's my grandson or granddaughter. Of course, Mom. I'll call you right after the party and tell you. I promise. But I want to find out with you. This is a family moment. Mom, please don't make a big deal out of this. It's just a party, not just a party. It's my grandson's celebration. Okay, not my grandson, but our child. And we decided it would be better to celebrate it in a small circle. Isn't Victoria a small circle? Victoria's organizing it. And she understands our needs. And I don't understand? Me, who gave birth to you and raised you? Evelyn sighed. Mom, you're doing exactly what I was worried about. You're turning everything into a conflict. I'm not turning it into a conflict. I just want to be a part of my daughter and grandson's lives. You will be a part of it. But not always and not everywhere. I have a new family now, a new life. Am I the old family that needs to be gotten rid of? Don't be silly. You're my mother, and I love you. But I'm also Travis's wife and Victoria's daughter-in-law. I have to consider their feelings too. What about my feelings? Your feelings are important too. That's why I'm calling, to explain the situation. Isn't it better to talk honestly than to cause trouble at the party? I realized that arguing was pointless. The decision had already been made, and not by me. When is this party? Next Saturday? In the afternoon, from 2 to 5. And then you'll call and tell me? Definitely. Right away. Okay, I said, even though there was nothing okay about it. Mom, please don't be upset. This really is the best option for everyone. Everyone except me. Don't say that. You want me to be happy, don't you? Of course I do. Then understand. I need peace in the family right now. Stress is bad for a child. Stress again. Once again, I was the source of stress for my own daughter. Okay, Evelyn. I understand. Thank you, Mom. I knew you would understand. After my daughter hung up, I sat in the kitchen, staring into space. The phone lay on the table, and the house was deafeningly silent. I felt betrayed, rejected, useless. My own daughter had excluded me from one of the most important moments of her life. That evening, I called Cheryl and told her about my conversation with Evelyn. Lorraine, you can't leave it at that, my friend exclaimed. Go to her and demand an explanation. What is there to explain? It's clear. I don't fit into her new lifestyle. But you're her mother. And that's your grandson. Cheryl, if I go to her now and make a scene, she might stop communicating with me altogether. And if the baby is born, I might not get to see him. If you don't do anything, the result will be the same. This Victoria is gradually pushing you out of Evelyn's life. But what can I do? Drag my daughter to the meeting by force. You can go to the party. Just show up and show her that it's not so easy to exclude you from your own grandson's life. Evelyn clearly said she doesn't want me there. Evelyn said what her mother-in-law told her to say. You have the right to be at your grandson's party. I thought long and hard about what Cheryl said. Part of me wanted to listen to my friend, go to the party, and show that I wasn't giving up. But another part of me was afraid of completely destroying the already fragile relationship with my daughter. I can't, Cheryl. If I show up uninvited, it will look like an invasion. Evelyn will never forgive me. And if you don't come, she'll realize that you can be excluded from any family events. Maybe after the baby is born, everything will change. Maybe motherhood will make her rethink her relationship with me. Or maybe it will only get worse. Victoria will have even more reasons to control your daughter if she becomes the main grandmother. I knew my friend was right, but I couldn't bring myself to take such a radical step. The fear of losing Evelyn completely paralyzed me. I'll wait, I finally said. I'll call her after the party and find out how it went. Maybe I'll find a way to mend our relationship. Lorraine, you're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake, and I'm ready to live with it. I spent the remaining week before the baby shower in agonizing anticipation. Work didn't distract me, TV didn't entertain me, books didn't captivate me. All I could think about was what was happening in my daughter's life without me, and the fact that on Saturday I would find out the sex of my grandson over the phone, like a stranger. On Friday evening, Cheryl tried once again to convince me to go to the party. This is your last chance, Lorraine. Tomorrow will determine whether you will be involved in this child's life or remain an outside observer. I will be involved. Evelyn promised to call. Promises are just words. Actions speak for themselves. And so far, your actions say that you're not needed. But I've already made my decision. No matter how painful the consequences may be, I will not impose myself where I'm not wanted, even if it means missing one of the most important moments in the life of my future grandson. Saturday morning was clear but cold. The February sun was shining brightly, but not warmly, and the snow sparkled on the lawns like scattered diamonds. I woke up early, even though I had no plans to go anywhere. It was my daughter's baby shower, to which I had not been invited. I tried to do some housework to distract myself. I cleaned the apartment, which was already clean, ironed the laundry, and made soup for the week ahead. But my thoughts kept returning to what was happening at Evelyn's house. What time did the party start? Who had arrived? What were they talking about? And most importantly, when would they find out the sex of the baby? By noon, I couldn't sit at home any longer. My nerves were stretched tight, and the silence in the apartment seemed deafening. I grabbed my car keys and drove toward the neighborhood where my daughter lived, not quite sure what I was going to do. At first, I just drove through the streets, past snow-covered parks and houses decorated for winter. Then, I turned onto the road leading to Eastern Promenade. My heart beat faster and faster as I approached Evelyn's house. I told myself that I would just drive by, see how many cars there were, and maybe get a sense of how the party was going. After parking a block away from my daughter's house, I walked to their street. The house looked festive. Pink and blue balloons were tied to the entrance, garlands hung in the windows, and there were lots of expensive cars in the driveway. I recognized Victoria's SUV and several other cars I had seen at the wedding. I stood on the opposite side of the street, feeling like a criminal spying on someone else's house. But this was my daughter's house, and they were celebrating my grandson or granddaughter here. Didn't I have the right to at least take a look? After a few minutes, I noticed that there was a tall thuja hedge behind the house that partially hid the backyard. If I could cross the neighboring property, the thought was crazy, but I couldn't shake it. I wanted to see my daughter on this important day, even if she didn't want to see me. The neighboring house seemed empty. There was no car in the garage, and the curtains were drawn. I quickly crossed their backyard and approached the fence separating the properties. There were small gaps between the thuja branches through which I could see Evelyn's yard. What I saw made my heart ache with pain and envy at the same time. The backyard had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Heaters were set up everywhere to keep the guests warm, and tents with transparent walls decorated with flowers and ribbons had been erected. Long tables were covered with white tablecloths and laden with exquisite treats. In the center of one of the tables stood a large cake decorated with figurines of babies and covered with white icing. The guests, about 20 of them, looked exactly the same as they did at the wedding. Elegant women in expensive coats and boots, men in cashmere coats, all with glasses of champagne in their hands. They laughed, talked, and played children's games. And in the center of all this splendor stood my Evelyn. She looked beautiful in her pink maternity dress, which accentuated her rounded belly. Her hair was styled in an elaborate hairstyle. Her makeup was flawless. She smiled, accepted congratulations, and unwrapped gifts. Victoria was always by her side, playing the role of a caring mother-in-law and party organizer. I watched as Evelyn held tiny dresses, booties, and toys in her hands. Each gift was clearly expensive, all in neutral colors: white, yellow, mint. The guests admired, commented, and gave advice, and I stood behind the fence, like a beggar at the window of an expensive store. After about an hour of watching, the ceremony I was so afraid of missing began. Victoria asked everyone to gather around the table with the cake. Evelyn and Travis stood next to each other, holding hands. They held a large knife for cutting the cake in their hands. "Dear friends," Victoria announced loudly, "the moment we've all been waiting for has arrived. Evelyn and Travis are about to find out the gender of their first child." The guests applauded and surrounded the young parents in a tight circle. I pressed myself against the fence, trying to see better through the branches. "On the count of 3, Victoria continued. 1, 2, 3. Evelyn and Travis together plunged the knife into the cake. When they lifted the first piece, everyone saw the pink filling inside the white icing. "It's a girl!" Victoria shouted. "We're going to have a princess!" An explosion of applause and cheers drowned out all other sounds. The guests hugged Evelyn, congratulated Travis, and took pictures with the cake. Someone brought pink balloons and started popping them, releasing confetti. And I stood behind the fence and cried, "A granddaughter! I'm going to have a granddaughter! A little girl I can love, spoil, and teach everything I know." But instead of joy, I felt only pain from finding out about it by peeking through the cracks in the fence like a stranger. Evelyn was glowing with happiness. She pressed her hands to her stomach, where she carried my granddaughter under her heart, and smiled as sincerely as she hadn't smiled in my presence in a long time. Travis hugged her shoulders. Victoria said something about names for girls, and the guests offered toasts, and none of them thought about the fact that somewhere nearby stood the woman who had given birth to the guest of honor and had the right to share this moment. I watched as Evelyn hugged Victoria, as they whispered something to each other, as the mother-in-law fixed her daughter-in-law's hair with a motherly gesture. Victoria played the role of mother better than I ever could. She had the money to organize such celebrations, the connections to create the right environment, and the experience of socializing in high society. And what could I offer? A job as a cashier, a modest apartment, love that obviously did not compensate for all the other shortcomings. The guests began to leave around 4 o'clock. I saw them hugging Evelyn goodbye, wishing her luck, promising to visit after the baby was born. Some gave additional gifts, obviously expensive bags with the logos of famous stores. When most of the guests had left, I decided it was time to go. But at that moment, what I feared most happened. Victoria came out of the house with garbage bags and headed for the container that stood next to the fence. She was only a few meters away from me, and I froze, hoping she wouldn't notice me. But Victoria had sharp eyesight and the instincts of a predator. "Who's there?" she asked sharply, looking in my direction. I didn't answer, hoping she would think she was mistaken. "I can see you. Come out immediately." There was no point in hiding anymore. I slowly emerged from behind the fence, feeling like a caught thief. Victoria looked at me with an expression of disgust and anger. "Lorraine! What are you doing here?" I just wanted— You were spying on us." Her voice was full of indignation. "Peeking through the fence like some kind of lunatic." "She's my daughter," I said quietly, "and my granddaughter. Your daughter made it clear that she didn't want you at this party. And you violated her wishes." "I wasn't interfering with the party. I was just— You trespassed on private property. I can call the police." The threat sounded quite serious. Victoria was capable of doing that. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'll leave." "Immediately!" and never come near our house again without an invitation. Our house? I asked. This is my daughter's house. Victoria smiled coldly. Your daughter? Lorraine, wake up. Evelyn is no longer your daughter. She is Travis's wife and part of our family. She has a new life, new priorities, new people who care about her. I'm her mother. That doesn't change just because she got married. Mother? Victoria laughed. Look at yourself. Standing behind a fence, peeping like a beggar at a shop window. What kind of mother are you? Her words cut like knives, but I tried to maintain my dignity. Evelyn loves me. She just doesn't understand right now. Doesn't understand what? That you're trying to drag her back into your gray, poor life? That you're jealous of her happiness? I'm not jealous. Yeah, I want to be part of her life. Then learn to know your place, Victoria said harshly. Evelyn belongs to our world now. She is a husband who can provide for her, a mother-in-law who understands her, friends who share her values. And you can only criticize and hold her back. That's not true. It's true, and you know it. Look how happy she is without you. Look at the wonderful party we've thrown. Could you have done something like this? I knew I couldn't. I didn't have the money for such a grand affair, the connections to attract such guests, or the experience to organize such events. It's not about money. It's all about money and opportunities, Victoria interrupted. Evelyn understands that. She's a smart girl. She knows what's best for her and her baby. And you're just getting in the way. I'm not getting in the way. I love her. Love is when you want the best for someone close to you. Not when you drag them into your poverty. Victoria moved closer, and I saw cold determination in her eyes. Listen to me carefully, Lorraine. Evelyn is pregnant. She needs peace and quiet. Your attempts to get involved in her life are creating stress that is harmful to the baby. If you really love your daughter, leave her alone. For how long? Forever? Until she wants to communicate with you herself. No pressure, no manipulation, no attempts to elicit pity. What if she never wants to? Victoria shrugged. Then you'll get what you deserve. She turned and walked toward the house, leaving me standing alone by the fence. I looked at the lit windows where my granddaughter's party was ending and felt something inside me finally break. I got home as if in a dream. I parked the car, went up to the apartment, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared into space for a long time. The pink filling of the cake, my granddaughter, the laughter of the guests, Evelyn's happy face, Victoria's cold eyes. Around 8 in the evening, the phone rang. Evelyn, as promised. Mom! We have a girl! My daughter's voice sounded excited and joyful. I know, dear. Congratulations. How do you know? Evelyn asked in surprise. She almost let it slip, but stopped herself in time. I could tell by your voice. You sound so happy. Yes, we're thrilled. Travis is already talking about being the princess's dad. And Victoria, she was such a big help with the arrangements. Everything was just perfect. I'm glad the party was a success. Mom, I was thinking, maybe you could come next week. We could talk about plans, about how you'll be involved in the baby's life. The offer should have made me happy, but after today, it sounded like a handout. I'll think about it, dear. Okay, I have to go. We still have guests. We'll talk later. After Evelyn hung up, I sat in the silence of my kitchen and thought about what had happened over the past few months. My daughter had become a stranger to me, someone I was preventing from being happy. My granddaughter, whom I had not yet seen, already had a grandmother who could give her more than I could. But I couldn't just give up. I couldn't let Victoria completely erase me from Evelyn's life. I had the right to fight for my daughter and granddaughter, even if the odds were slim. I took a sheet of paper and began to write a letter. Maybe words would reach Evelyn better than conversations. Maybe she would understand what was happening and find the strength to resist the manipulation. Dear Evelyn, I began and paused, searching for words that could bring my daughter back to me. In the end, I stated 3 simple truths. First, you can't change the past, but you can change the future. Second, everyone has the right to their own boundaries. Third, a person's strength is manifested in their ability not only to forgive, but also to make decisions for themselves. Now I want to ask you, would you forgive or would you draw a line under it? Write your opinion in the comments and tell us where you are listening from.